Hello everyone, welcome to our first session of Fusion 360. We're going to start with the interface today, get to know the program a little bit. I'm working on a Mac, but if you're working on a Windows system, most things should be similar. So you can see some very minute differences on the taskbar, but I'm going to be recording the software today, so you're not seeing my taskbar. So let's begin with the basics. Now, I'm going to begin from left to right. As the program is organized that way, it'll make it easier. Some of you might be seeing more icons on the top. That's fine. That depends on your screen resolution. Some of the stuff you may be seeing is different, as I have customized my menu a little bit, which I will also show you how to do in the future. Okay, let's begin. Let's begin with the top left. Now, there's this small grid icon on the top left. It says Show Data Panel. When you click that, you will see your projects. You will see it something like this. I have many projects, as you can see. And on the top left, you will see my name. Now, this is because I'm on a single user storage. Now, if I click this, you will see that I'm also a member of a team. Now, in this class, we will be using single user storage, but in the future, if you want to work on a project with your team members or with a group, you can choose or make a team, create or join a team, then you can work on the same project together. For the time being, let's work like this. Now, on the right, you will see a refresh icon. Now, when you load stuff to Fusion, when you upload stuff, which we will look at in a second, sometimes you need to refresh this. When you click on it, the icon will start to rotate, and it will refresh from the Fusion Cloud system, so you can have your most recent projects. Now there's a search icon, which you can search your data by name. And we have the close icon, so the grid goes away. Now, below, you can see all projects is marked. You can select your pinned projects to show, owned by me, shared with me. Now, like I said, you can share your projects with others, but most of the time, you can just choose all projects to see everything. When you click New Project, you will get the option to create a new project and give it a name, and which is what I will do right now. ID 113. Okay, so now Fusion is creating a folder for me, and I can pin this folder so it stays on top. Okay, now when I double click this folder, I go into the internals of the folder, and you can see I have some new icons on the top. Now, the first one is data, which will be chosen by default, and the second one is people. Now, the people is something that you can examine later, and you can invite people to see your projects. And on the team, you can invite people to work on the same project with you. Okay. Now, below that, we have upload, which you can choose to upload data, which can be from other modeling programs like step data or STL data. You can upload drawings, anything you need to work on the design, and you can create folders in folders. You have this icon to choose your settings, which is kind of like right-clicking in Windows Explorer. You can sort by last updated or name, and you can change your viewing preferences. Now we have this small globe icon, which opens the project on the A360 website, which is on the web, which takes your data from the cloud. We might get to explore that later. Now, While this is open, I'm going to move to the next icon, which is File. Now, File is very similar to other programs. You can create new designs, electronics designs, drawings, open up files from your computer and upload them. You can recover documents if your Fusion closes for some reason. Your electricity gets cut when you're working on a desktop. Fusion keeps a recovered documents tab here, which shows you the latest documents that you were working on, which weren't saved when your computer shut down. So you can recall them from this list. It'll give you time and date on which it was created. So this would be something like your last save time. Okay. Now if you go back to the file, you can see we can save our documents from here, export them, and Fusion will give you different export options. You can 3D print directly to your printer. You can capture an image on what's currently being displayed, and you can view some of the details about your navigation, which will come back later, but we won't be using this. We will be using some other way to view this. Now there's a save command right here. It's the same as pressing Ctrl S. We have our undo and redo right up there. Now we have a file open. You can see it's not titled currently. We have our close. We have new design icon, which is the plus. Then we have our extensions. Now, if you registered Fusion with your educational account, you can click this extension and see some extensions that are currently being offered. Now, I have none currently being used, but I'm going to enable these extensions. I'm going to say Start Access. Now, because I have an educational account, it's going to give me an access for 30 days, which it says right there. Okay, I can go back, enable the other one. Now, we will not be using these extensions right away. Some of them we will not use in this class, but if you want to do some digging on your own about what Fusion can do, these extensions help out a lot, so you can try them on your own time. Now I enabled all of these extensions. You can see it says active on the bottom. So they're currently working. They will work for 30 days. Then after the 30 days, you can re-enable them. Okay. Now, next one is the clock icon. Let me get rid of these extension information bars. Okay. Now, when you click the clock icon, you will see this. You will see the job status, which we'll talk about, and working online. Now, Fusion has the option to work offline, but when you work offline, you will lose access to your cloud files. It's not that Fusion won't work. Fusion will work, but you will lose access to the files that you have on the cloud, and when you get back online, you can still access them again. Now, let's look at job status. This is important. Now, the first one is data. This is the screen where you will see your uploading files, your downloading files, everything will be here. Now, when you run simulations in the future, this is where you will see these. Generators design, they will be here. And drawing automation, they will be here. Now, these simulation generator and drawing automation are a little bit advanced for now. We might touch on generative design a little bit, but data is where we'll see most of our stuff. And I'll do an example for that later in the process. Now we have this bell icon, which is our notification center. When you click that, it gives you all the information about what's happening with Fusion. If you get an update through Fusion, this is where it will show. If you lose your connection to the internet, it will show here. So this is where you can see the latest information. I just updated my Fusion. Okay, the video got cut off. Let's go back to where we were. Now we were talking about the notification center, and the last part of the video showed that I had an update here, which I had applied, and it was letting me know. Now I don't have any notifications. And this is the help icon. This is where you get your help from. It gives you a learning and documentation, which is very good. You can check it out. There's the setup. There's the community. You can go and post your questions on the forum if you like, get answers. It works pretty good. There's the support and diagnostics. When you have a critical crash, for example, you get your diagnostic log file from there and you can upload it and have the Autodesk team check it out. Now, there's a manual check for update. Fusion is pretty good with automatic updates, but if you want to do your manual update, you can check here. There's the What's New panel. It gives you the latest information on the latest update that you installed. And there's the About. Now, the About is important because when you click About, it gives you information about what type of, what make and model Fusion you're using, and it gives you information about your current license, and it says student right here. Yours should also say student right there. Okay. Now, the last one, it's important. Now, the first one goes to your Autodesk account, the account that you signed up for Fusion. The second one is the one that we'll get into right now, Preferences. Now, when you open up Preferences, you will see a window which shows you all the settings of Fusion that you should or you may want to change. Now, the General tab is where it opens up. Then you can follow as such. Let's start with the General. Now, the graphics driver is something you can select. If you have more than one graphic card, you can select it here. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm going to talk about some of the specific ones that you might want to look into. When you open up Fusion, you can check it to go to the Home tab when the application starts. Now, this is right here. I don't use it, but you may. Now, cache period is where it keeps your open files. Mine is set to 15 days. And the automatic recovery backup. This is the recovery files I showed you. My setting allows Fusion to take a save every 5 minutes. Now, this one, the default modeling orientation is important. Yours might be set different, but I use Z up for my Fusion settings. And the reason for that is I use Fusion for manufacturing. I design stuff here and send it out to be manufactured. And most manufacturing machines consider Z, the Z-axis, what we see right here on the corner. You see this cube, and you can see my Z-axis, which is facing towards the top. Z up means your Z-axis will face towards the top. I would like to have you guys change this and make Z up. Okay. Some of the stuff that you see here you can close, but I like to keep them open. I like to see the tooltips, especially now that I'm giving this class on the video. It tells me what I'm holding my mouse over. The command prompt, it is when you want to enter dimensions manually. This is where the command prompt is. Default measure, we will get into this. The rest we will get into later. Now, the pan, zoom, orbit shortcuts. SolidWorks was very early in this CAD game, so most of the panning, zooming, and orbiting shortcuts are from SolidWorks. But if you've used other modeling programs that you're familiar with, and if it's on this list, you can choose that to change your shortcuts. Now, I like to keep my default orbit type as free orbit, which means I can rotate my parts 360 degrees on each axis with my mouse, which is cool. Reverse zoom direction is when you scroll with your mouse. Some people like to scroll up to go deep. Some people like to scroll up to come close. You can change it here. You can change your camera pivot and some of the other stuff we'll get into later. Now, we will talk about these as we work through our lessons. So you don't really have to change anything right now, but if you really want to look into it, take a look under graphics. This will give you some graphics options. Now, if your graphics card isn't so strong, you can change the transparency effects to be better display to better performance. It will give you better performance in Fusion. And if you go under display, you can change these to get better performance. Limit effects in high resolution graphics. You can click this if your graphic card isn't as strong. And let's see, unit and value display. I like to keep my precision to 3 parts after the dot, which is enough. This is what a micron is. The 3 would be a single micron. You can change your scientific notation here as well. I wouldn't really touch those if I were you, but if you don't want to see scientific notation for, let's say, 4 characters after the dot, you can use scientific notation above this number and below this number. I like to keep it that way so I don't see scientific notation that much. Okay, default units in my design area are always millimeters. Designers work in millimeters. Architects usually work in centimeters. So keep that in millimeters. Now, if you want to be a little bit more experimental, you can go into preview features. And in preview features, you can select stuff that is currently being worked on by the Autodesk Fusion team. So anything that you see here can be considered a beta product. Okay, I like to have some of these selected because I know they've been pretty stable, but you don't have to select anything from this. Okay. Okay. Now let's get out of here. Okay. And let's close this so we can see the whole screen. Now, going below, we have our workspace selector. Now, what we usually do is we work in design space. The design space enables us to draw and model whatever we need, but there are more spaces. If you click the icon, you will see that there are a total of 7 spaces. Now, to generate a design space is something that we might get into towards the end of the semester if you have time. It's AI based, so Fusion calculates stuff according to your inputs. You might have seen some generatively designed objects on the internet. This is similar. We have the render space where we can render what we modeled. We have the animation space to create basic animations for our assemblies. We have the simulation space where we can test out our models. We have the manufacturing space where we can make manufacturing codes for machining, cutting, drilling, all kinds of operations. Then we have the drawing space where we get to have technical drawings made by Fusion so we can print them out or send them to people who are going to manufacture the parts. Now, let's stay in the design space. Now we have tabs. The next thing is the tabs. These are the tabs. We have the solid modeling tab, surface modeling tab, the mesh modeling tab, the sheet metal tab, the plastic tab, utilities tab, and the management tab. Now, the first one, the solid modeling, is where you will spend most of your time. But we will also touch on surface and mesh modeling and sheet modeling. The other three, the plastic modeling space, is very specific, but as you can see, some of the items are very common to solid modeling. That is because plastics workspace is actually a part of the solid modeling workspace. Then we have the utilities, where you can send your design to 3D printing. We have nesting for cutting operations. We have add-ins. Fusion does have some add-ins which you can download from Fusion. We have the utilities, which we don't use that much because these are automatic in our settings. We have measurement. We have interference and other kinds of checks we also have under the solid modeling tab. And in management, in the future, when you have a lot of assembly parts, you can use the bill of materials to list all of the parts in your assembly. We will not be using it for now. Now, this is the solid modeling tab. Before we get into the icons, which we will use extensively, let's talk about this browser on the left-hand side. Now, the browser has these icons. The leftmost icon with the double arrows is what you use to hide it. You might want to hide this sometimes if you're working or you need the space, especially on a laptop, for example. It's sometimes necessary to hide the browser for extra space. Most of the time, you will have it open. Now, the one next to it is a similar icon from the operating system icons. It hides your tab, the internals of your tab, but it doesn't make it smaller. And under that, you start to see your modeling tree. Now, Fusion is different from some of the CAD programs where it doesn't list everything on the modeling tree. It keeps some of your items in the modeling tree and most of your items in what we call the history tab. The tab that you see, or the area that you see on the bottom side of your screen, is what we call the history tab. And on this history tab, you have some movement icons. Okay, this is also can be used for the animations. Then you have your items on your history. Now, I created a sketch, and as soon as I created a sketch, it put a sketch in my history tab. Okay, the other parts of my history tab are currently empty, but I will fill them in a second to show you how this goes. But currently I have a single item. And on the far right hand, I have my settings for this. Now, the topmost setting is important. It says do not capture design history. You have the option in Fusion to work similar to a surface modeling program where you don't capture the history. But if you don't capture the history, you will not be able to benefit from the full performance or parametric modeling set of Fusion. At certain times, which we will also do, you may want to get rid of the history or get out of the history capture mode. But as of now, we will be capturing the design history. There's the component color swatch, which is this pinkish color that you currently see on my screen right here, and hide all inactive features, which is selected automatically, and you will see that soon. If I unclick this, you won't see any change, but in the future, we will see how that affects it. Now, coming back to our tree, as you can see, there's a color right there, which is also pink. Now, anything I do in this, let's say, component will be reflected as the same color here. So this color tells me that I'm working in this component. Something else tells me that also. It's this dot. This dot currently tells me that this component is active. I don't have a name for it yet, but let's create a name for it. And for me to create a name for this, the easiest way is to save it. Now, it's asking me for a name. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to say sample. Okay. So, as you can see, it's creating a sample document in the cloud, which I can access from any Fusion that I log into. Now, in this sample, it's showing me this orange cube icon. Okay. It has the name, it has the time it was created, and it has this B, which stands for my name. It means I created this, and I'm the only person currently working on this. Okay. Now, this V1 is important. The V stands for version. The nice thing about this parametric modeling system is every save that you make on this file will create a version. Now we can test this out really easily. I'm going to open up this sketch that I had created. I'm going to create a box, and we will get into how we do this. And I'm going to create another one inside of it. I'm going to click extrude, and I'm going to extrude this box. Okay. Now, I've created a box, and as soon as I started modifying this file, Fusion put an asterisk next to 1 V. V1 asterisk, okay? That asterisk is telling me that this file hasn't been saved after modification. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this icon and I'm going to click save again. It says version description. Now, you may want to give names to this. It's good practice, okay? And there's a reason for that. I'm going to say made box, okay? Now, as soon as I save it, Fusion changed an icon because now there's something to display. It's my box, okay? And it says version 2. Now, when I click this, it's giving me all the file versions that are being saved as a list, okay? It says the history. It says uses, okay? I'm not referring this part in any other document. And because it doesn't have uses, it doesn't have used in, and it doesn't have any drawings attached to it, okay? But the nice thing is I can go back to one of the versions and say, open this version, okay? When I say open, it's going to open that version. So any changes I made after it will be saved as another file. And if I make any changes to this, I can save it as another version, okay? We don't need it right now. Let's close it. Let's close this. Okay. Let's close that data panel. Okay, so this is my file. Now that I used an extrude command to make a box, in my history down below, it's showing me a sketch and an extrude command. Okay, these are what I used to make this box. On the right hand tree, it's giving me a body. This is called a body, a solid body. And it's giving me the sketch that I worked with. This sketch down below and this sketch represent the same thing. Okay, now let's open all of these so we can talk about the whole tree. Now, on the top, you will have your document settings. Once you click that, okay, if there are any settings about this document, you can get into them from here, okay? Now, the only setting I have with this document is currently my units, and it says millimeter. And if I want to modify this, I can click the icon that is appearing next to it. Okay. If I click that, on the right-hand side, it says change active units. You can select one of the other active units if you desire, but most of the time, like I said, Designers work in millimeters, so I will keep this. And I can say cancel. Now, below that, there's the named views. The named views are also represented on the right-hand corner cube. We have the top, which is the top view, and then when I click on it, you can see that it goes to that view. We have the front, we have the right, and we have home. Home is an isometric view. And we will get to talking about the isometric view and the perspective view a little bit later. But Fusion starts with the isometric view, and I suggest you guys to use the isometric view when you want to look at your object from a three-dimensional perspective. That's funny. I used perspective, right? Now, below that, we have the origin. As you can see, the eye icon has a line going through it. That means that the origin is currently not being displayed. The important thing to note here is if the icon has an eye going through it, and if that heading has other things under it, like what we see here, it will not display anything that is under it. Okay, so when I click this icon, you can see the other several things are also highlighted. Okay, but this doesn't work the other way around. See, this O, which is my origin point, you can see it right there. Okay, this dot, this white dot, that's my origin dot. I can click the eye next to it, and only that will be hidden. Anything under it or anything above it will not be affected because these do not belong to the origin. Okay, I can right click that again, left click that again, and see it. Now, so what are these? The origin we talked about. Actually, let me hide my body. I'm going to do the same thing. I can click this one because I only have a single body, or I can click this one. Okay. Now, let's talk about this. And we're going to talk about this in detail in the class. Now, I'm trying to zoom in or zoom out, and it's not changing in size. There's a reason for this. And the main reason is this is an imaginary axis and plane image. Okay. These don't have a size. They're relative, and they're only being displayed as a way for you to start your sketch. Okay? And when we get to sketch, we're going to talk more about the planes as well. Now, let me hide the origin. Actually, let me hide everything, and let's open them one by one. Okay? Now we don't see anything. Let's start with the origin. This is my origin. This is my 0, 0, 0 point in X, Y, and Z axes. Okay? Now, the next one, this is my X axis. You can see the same red axis right here. Okay? On the right-hand top corner, right below the cube, you can see it. And when I rotate my screen, rotate this, you can see that there's also a green one. Okay, so we have our three main axes being shown right there. Let me hide my x-axis, open up my y, you can see it's green. And let's open up the z. Okay, so that's the blue. Now, one thing to keep in mind, which is an easy way to remember the colors of the axes, the axes go as X, Y, and Z, which is very similar to RGB. If you ever heard RGB, which stands for green, red, green, blue, RGB, the first letters of each, you can remember X, Y, Z colors from RGB. Red is X, green is Y, and B is blue, which is Z. Okay, so now let's look at our plane. this is the X and Y plane, okay? It's the same plane as the top plane. If I click top right there, you can see it. And how do I know this is the X and Y plane? It's very easy, actually. If I turn on X and Y axes, I can see that this plane is in relation to these axes. It is formed by these axes. The same goes for all the other planes. So right now I'm having a hard time seeing my X and Z plane because I'm looking at it from the side. But if I turn my screen like that, I can see this plane as well. And if I click this, it is highlighted, so I can see it in blue. If I click front, it becomes a square. I can also do the same test like this. Open up my X and Z axes. As you can see, it is in relation to these, and is you can say parallel to the axes, and it is formed by those axes. Okay, the same goes for the Y and Z plane as well. Okay. Okay. Now, as you can see, my origin is highlighted. The eye is open, but the others, the eye is closed, so I'm not seeing them. But if I open up all of them, then just close my origin, they will be gone. Okay. Now, the next one, the bodies. Now, the bodies is where Fusion keeps all of the solid models. Now, we're going to talk about what a vertex is, an axis, a line, a curve, a plane. All of these we're going to talk about in class. But for now, you can consider a body as an object that can be examined in 3 dimensions. Okay? Unlike lines, planes, dots, or vertices, which cannot be seen in reality, 3-dimensional objects can be. And this is what a body represents. Okay? Now my top bodies is the eye is open, but the body that is under it, which is an alt of the bodies category, is closed. Let me open up this eye, and that's where my solid is. That's where my body is. Okay? Now, the way I have my system set up, when I turn the mouse wheel towards the screen, the object goes away. When I turn the mouse wheel towards me, the object comes closer. So this is my zoom. When I click my mouse wheel, you can see the orbit icon. See this? This is my mouse cursor. As soon as I click and hold my mouse wheel as a button, I can orbit the object. Okay? That's how you orbit the object. Okay? That's how I can look at it from all sides, top, bottom, and I can visualize the object. Okay? So that's my body. Now, under it, I have my sketches. Now, the sketching part is very important in solid modeling. In all of the solid modeling programs, you will have the ability to sketch. Most of the features that you will make, and by features, I mean extrusions, rotations, sweeps, lofts, they will start with a sketch. Sometimes that sketch will be on your component, on the body. Sometimes you will have to draw it. And in Fusion, we will do both because both are useful. For now, all you need to know is sketching is where we start to model. Okay. Right now, my sketch, the eye on my sketch is closed. The reason for that is when I used my sketch and when I made an extrusion with that sketch, the sketch gets hidden automatically. This is The reason for this is, so as you keep doing different types of solid modeling, your sketches don't get mixed up. But if you want to see your sketch, all you have to do is click the eye icon, and you can see that my sketch is there. And if you just want to see the sketch, you can hide the body. And this is the sketch that enabled me to create an extrude, and I can just see the sketch. Now, the nice thing about parametric modeling, solid modeling, is I can go back to that sketch now. I can go on my history or right here, it doesn't matter. Right click it, and I can say edit this sketch. I want to edit it. Edit means change. If I click it, it goes back into the sketch, and as you can see, the extrusion is now grayed out. It's like it has never calculated that, but it is still here, but it's grayed out. And I can make a change. Let's move this a little bit smaller. Let's actually select all of it, and when I double click a line, every line that is connected to it will get highlighted, and I can drag it. I can click and hold. Oop. I can double click to select every connected line. I can click, hold, and drag. Okay, let's move it up here. Okay, when I say finish sketch right on the top right hand corner or right there, it will finish this sketch. Okay, now this is my changed body. Okay, you can see the sketch is hidden, but it's still there. It's still there, but it is hidden. Okay, so I changed my solid. Now, let's move forward with the UI. Okay, now on the bottom, let's continue with the bottom. We have these 8 icons. You might not use them all the time, but these are important icons. Now, let's start with the first one. The first one gives me the choice to constraint orbit or free orbit. Now, with free orbit, like I said, if I click my middle mouse button, I can look at every part of the object. But if I were to select constraint orbit, there is a very faint line, a circle that has appeared on my screen. I don't know how visible it will be in the video, but you guys can try it on your computers. A very faint circle with 6 small lines coming out of it. Now, those are important, and the reason for that is those lines will change your mouse icon when you hover over them. Let's say when I move my mouse to that point, as you can see, it changes. Whoop. It changes, and it becomes a rotation icon. And if I click and move it with my left mouse button, it just rotates it around that axis. Okay. Now, if I do the same thing on the bottom small line, it allows me to rotate it around that. Okay. Now, if I do the same thing on the circle, when I go over the circle, it rotates it inside of that circle. Okay. You can see like that. Okay. But if I do the same thing outside of these lines, it goes into free orbit mode. Okay, that's when I can look at everything. Some people like to use it like this, with this faint line, so if they want to rotate it in a constrained way, they will choose constraint orbit. I don't use it, but you may. Okay. The escape on your keyboard, the ESC button, which is on the top left part of your keyboard, will cancel any command that you choose. Okay? Now, let's move on. The next icon is the the look at icon, which is very useful when you want to see the object from a certain point of view. I choose the look at icon, then select the plane, and it shows me that plane. It makes that plane my direct view. Now, let's say I want to look at top, turns the top. Let's say I want to look at the front. So that's where it changes. Okay, that's what the look at icon means. It gives you a point of view. Now we have the pan icon, which is our small hand. It gives you the ability to pan your object, which means move it without any kind of a rotation. Okay, so that's what that icon does. Escape. We have our zoom icon. Okay, it zooms it without moving left or right. But once you get used to using the mouse wheel, you don't really use this, but it's good to have. Okay. Then we have the fit icon. Let's say I did something like this, and it was a very complex object, and I don't know where in the screen it is. I can go and click fit, and it will fit the object inside of my screen, full size. Okay, that's what the fit does. Now, when you click next to it, the down arrow, it will give you a zoom window as well. And if you click zoom window, what it will do is it will allow you to draw a zoom section. Let's say I want to look at this. I can draw it like that, and it will zoom to that point. This is good for looking into details when you have complex models. Okay. Now, the next icon that looks like a screen is the display settings. When you click that, it will give you, the first one will give you a visual style. Now, I usually work with shaded with visible edges only. Okay, and let's turn this into an isometric kind of view so you can see the difference. Okay, let's say I chose a shaded visual style. As you can see, I have lost my lines. Okay, that means it's not showing me the lines unless I hover over them with the mouse. Okay, that's the only difference. It's still shading my model, but it's not giving me the lines. Now let's select the other one. Shade with hidden edges. Now this is useful sometimes. It gives you the ability to see all the other lines which should be hidden from view, as this is a solid object, but it acts like the object is transparent. So you can see I can see the inside of the model, and these lines are dashed. If you look closely, you will see small dashes on the internal or the hidden lines that are towards the back side of the model. Okay. Now, the next one, shaded visible edges only. It's the one that we started with. The one after that is wireframe. Now, wireframe is the model that we had without any shading, so you can't see the planes. Okay. There's no possible way to see the planes. What is being highlighted is the one that my mouse is over. Okay, so you can see that the one that is my mouse controlling, the one that I started with, that's the only one that is being shaded. Now the next one, wireframe with hidden edges. The only difference is the edges that are on the back side are dashed lines. And the last one, wireframe with visible edges. Okay. So this is like shaded with visible edges without the shading. Okay, let's go back to shaded view. Now the environment. This is good when you're doing some long hours working So you can change your fusion to look like it's a dark theme. There are other ones as well, like the gray room. It's easier on the eyes if you choose, okay? People have different preferences, especially people who come from different CAD programs, like the old Solid Edge, which used to have a blue background. They like this. Infinity Pool, it's like a gradient as it goes back. And lastly, River Rubicon, which is a gradient on the other way. It's darker on top, lighter on the bottom. Okay. This is completely personal preference. You can choose whichever you like. It doesn't affect your model. Okay. Now, the effects. The effects are important. Why are they important? Now, when you're turning an object, you will see some shadows. You will see some darkening, as you can see there. These are controlled from the effects. Now, if I were to remove the ground plane and ambient occlusion, you will see that everything became lighter, especially if I was using the environment, let's say, infinity pool, okay? Now, the infinity pool, the background is lost. So why is the background lost? Because I got rid of the effects. Now, if I were to put the effects back in, the infinity pool background comes into being. But if I get rid of the effects, I lose that. So you have to play with these according to what you like. These don't affect your model, but they may affect how long you can work with the program. This is completely personal preference, okay? Now, if you turn on object shadows, you will see on some of the environments, you will see a shadow that is on the floor, okay? Right now, I don't have my model sitting on the floor, so you're not seeing a shadow. But in some of the different ones, you will see a shadow that is cast on the floor. Now, object visibility. All the objects that we talked about, planes, axes, points. The visibility of these can be controlled here. I would not play with these in the beginning, especially while you're learning. But then, if your screen is getting too crowded because of your model, you can start to turn these off. It will increase the performance a little bit, okay? Now the camera. The camera, what we talked about, the isometric view or the perspective view is something of a choice. Now, because I like to see parallel lines rather than lines vanishing to a space. Okay, I had to answer phone. So we're talking about the orthographic and the perspective view. Now, if I were to click this corner of this cube, it will change it into my 3/4 view. That's what it's called, 3/4. Now, this 3/4 view is giving me a perspective view right now. And the perspective view means these parallel lines are going to a vanishing point. We'll talk about this in detail in class. And in perspective view, when you look at an object from the side, like that, you may think that you're looking at the side and the back side is exactly the shape of the front side because it's a prism. But if I were to click this and say Visual Style, shaded with hidden edges, you will see that the back rectangle is actually smaller than the front rectangle, right? That's what the perspective view enables you to do. See it more like lifelike, okay? The danger of this view is when you're modeling, you can't tell if you modeled something exactly right, exactly parallel, or exactly in the right size. So when you want to look at your object to be more lifelike, you can open the perspective view, but I suggest you to model in the orthographic view, okay? Now, as you can see, when I look at the object from the side now, the back rectangle is the same size as the front rectangle, okay? Now, there's this one more option, perspective with ortho faces. This is interesting. When you rotate your object into a view that is not exactly looking at a face, it will show you perspective. But as soon as you click a face that is on the cube, it will jump into an orthographic view. Now, this is something that is completely subjective. Some people like this. I don't. I don't like this jump. As soon as I rotate it, it jumps out. When I click it, it jumps back in. I don't like that, so I don't keep it like that. I keep it in orthographic view. Now, the ground plane offset. As soon as I click that, it asks me if I want to make it adaptive. Now, the ground plane, when I click OK, there's a ground plane. When I click this and open this, and only open that. Let's close these. Okay, now, as you can see, this is the top, and this is the bottom, right? This is the bottom. So when I do this, and when I open up my X and Y plane, which is this one, that's my ground plane, okay? And the reason for that being my ground plane is because Z is up. So this is the plane of the ground plane. Now, when I'm making a model that is not on the ground plane, I can unclick this and set my own ground plane. I can make my ground plane here, or I can make it here. And as soon as I go below the object, you can see that there's a shadow. Let's make it minus 20 millimeters, okay? Now, I said okay, and now I have a ground plane. Now, for this to be visible, let's close this plane so you only see my ground plane. I have to have the ground plane selected in my effects, because if I unclick this, it goes away, okay? And I also have the ground shadow. If I unclick this, it goes away. I usually keep these on because sometimes it's useful, especially if I want to render something after I model it. It's good to have your object on the ground plane. It creates more realistic shadows, and your object does not fly. It sits on the ground. Unless, of course, you're making a flying object. Have a sip of coffee. Okay. Now the last one is exit full screen. As I'm recording this video in full screen, I don't want to click this. Now, the one next to it, the grid and snaps. Now, if I were to click this, I would get this background grid. Some people like to draw on notepads with grids. Those people might like this. As you can see, there's a limited grid plane. This grid plane can get bigger, smaller, depending on your object. But as you can see, the grid plane is not on the plane of my shadow. It's on the plane of the bottom of my part, okay? That's important for Fusion because the grid plane is actually in relationship to my bottom plane. It's not in relationship to my shadow plane, okay? I don't work with layout grids, but you may choose to. You can also have it snap to that grid if you're making a model as such. Okay, when you're designing one of the faces, if you want to snap to the grid, that's also an option. I don't use it. Okay, you can change the size of your grid. You can say adaptive, or you can make it fixed. You can make every square, I'm talking not about small squares, the bigger squares, a certain size. Okay. You can also create a rotation increment, which means you can only draw in 5-degree increments. Okay. Like I said, I don't use it. You may choose to. It's personal preference. Okay. And the last one, you can have multiple views like some other CAD programs. Okay. This is also a choice. In Fusion, we usually don't use it, but people who are used to, let's say, 3D Studio Max or Rhino may choose to use it. I don't use it, so I use a single view. It's actually a little bit easier in Fusion because of how easy you can move from point to point, and because of being able to draw sketches on different types of planes. Now, this is our basic UI, okay? Now, let's start with the most basic elements so you can do some practice, okay? I'm going to start a new sketch, a new design. Okay, so I click the plus icon, a new design appears. I'm going to give it a name by saving it. And I'm going to say sample 2. I'm going to click return or enter. And if I look at my data panel, it's creating me a sample 2. It doesn't have an image as of yet because there's nothing to display. Let's say you named it wrong and you want to change it. All you have to do is right click the box and select rename. Okay, let's give it another name. Let's say sample new. I click enter, so it's recording that into the cloud, and now I have sample new. Let's close out that data panel so we get more screen space. Now, the way we start every sketch, every component, not sketch, is with a sketch. Now, when I select create sketch, it gives me the planes that we were talking about. It shows them to me, and it only shows them momentarily. I can select one of these to start my initial sketch. Okay, let's say I want to work on the right side this time. I click that. As you can see, it put a grid on that. If I want to look at this, all I have to do is click the right on the cube, okay? And it's giving me all these options under a sketch palette, okay? Now, it's saying sketch grid, should I show it? If I say no, it will remove that grid, okay? Do you want to snap? What does that mean? Let me select a line, okay? When I select line, I can draw from anywhere to anywhere, okay? But if I say snap, it's going to try and snap to a certain point, okay? It's going to try and snap me in, and you can see my cursor changing. My crosshair cursor is getting a square around it. See that? That's snapping. It will still let you draw to any point, but it will also snap. It's not a forced snap like some programs. It's more like a choice snap, okay? So it's snapping to every 5 millimeters. Okay. Now, also, there's this dimension that is on my line. Now, if I don't enter anything, I can choose any location. But if I were to write a number, let's say I want this line to be exactly 100 millimeters long. You can see as soon as I type 100, a small lock icon appears next to my 100 number. That means wherever I take this line, it will be 100 millimeters. And if I want to specify the other number that keeps changing, that which is the angle to the first line I drew, I can write that too. I can say tab, which moves to that number, 45. Okay. Now I can't change that line anymore other than the top 45 or the bottom 45. Okay. So it's fixed. Let me click it, and that's my 45-degree, 100 millimeter line. Okay. If I press tab now, which is my third line, it will jump to my degree. Let's say 90. Okay. So it's locked. And let's say 90 millimeters for this line. So I press tab, so I jump to that number. If I keep pressing tab, you can see it jumps between the length and the angle, the length and the angle. So let's specify a 90 millimeters length and press enter. And that's my line. Now, the slice, let's do this. I'm using slice now. As you can see, it's not changing anything because slice doesn't work without you choosing something to slice, and slice doesn't work when you're sketching. Okay, so we'll talk about that later. Profile. Now, profile is important. Why is it important? Because profile shows you the sketches that have been closed. What does that mean? Well, that means if a sketch ends at the point that it begins and it has an area, that means that sketch profile is closed. Let me take another line. Let's do this. Let me draw a line like that and come back to the beginning point. Okay. Now you're not seeing an area. Even if I click profile, you're not seeing an area because that's two lines on top of each other. It's not defining an area. But if I click line, then create a square. Okay, something like that. Okay, and then click profile. You can see it's shaded as well as this triangle. Now this triangle has two shades because Fusion is thinking because a line is going through this triangle, this might actually be two profiles, and you can act like it's two profiles. We'll get to that in a second. Points. If you look at your screen while you're drawing and click points, you will see that the beginning and ending lines, if they are open, it will show you points. If the sketch is open, how can you tell this? Well, look at this line on the top. This line has two lines on top of each other. It doesn't have an area, but because the line goes back onto itself, it's closed. Okay, that's why it's not showing the points when I click points. Dimensions, as the name suggests, if you unclick it, you will not see the dimensions. If you click it, you will. Now, constraints, which is the topic of our next lesson, will show you the constraints, which is like this. If you look at my mouse cursor, you have a horizontal constraint, a perpendicular constraint. It will hide those or show them. Okay. Projected geometries, construction geometries, these are our next lesson. Also 3D sketch, it's an upcoming lesson, okay? So I have all these sketches, all these lines on my first sketch. I have closed, I have open, and I have on top of, on the same sketch. Let's finish this. Let's finish this sketch. As soon as I click finish, all my dimensions went away, my constraints went away. Now this is a sketch that is to be used for modeling. As you can see, my open lines, which are called contours, have the points in the end, and my closed contours don't have the points showing. Okay? Now, if I were to rotate this sketch a little bit in 3D, okay, you can see that I can move it. Now, what I need you to practice is make sketches as such. Different sketches with different lines, single lines. Then select the first solid modeling icon, which is the extrude command, the command that you will use the most. Then click on your closed profiles. And as soon as you do, you will see that it gives you a small arrow and an input box. Okay. Now I'm going to move this arrow, and I'm going to move it back. And as soon as I do, I'm getting a three-dimensional object. Okay. You can see the number inside of that object is changing. The number increment is 10 millimeters right now. If I focus in, if I zoom in, the increment will turn into a millimeter. If I zoom even more, okay, you can see the number right there and here. The increment will move in half a millimeter. So the more you focus, zoom in, the more control you have. Okay. If you don't want to use this, you can also input it. Input your number. Let's say minus 50 millimeters. Okay. And that's it. That's where we have our first 3D model. Now, I have hidden edges showing. Let's remove that for now. Okay. And I have my ground shadow plane. And that can stay. That's fine. Now, let's say I want to use that sketch to make more models, which I can do. I can go open this sketch on the left-hand tree. I can make it visible. Okay. I can go to extrude, and I can select one of the other profiles or the same profile to create another three-dimensional body. Let's pull this one forward like that. Okay. Now, let's talk about the extrude box too. Now, you can see that it says Fusion Default on the top. Now, this Fusion Default controls what's inside of this box. You can make your own presets, but you will not find it necessary in the beginning. It will show you, it's asking me what type of an extrusion do I want. Do I want the full body extrusion, or do I want a fin extrusion? If I click fin, you can see that it's making the object have a thickness, a wall thickness. That's what we call it. And the wall thickness is controlled right here, right there. If I make that 2, it will make the wall thickness thicker. Okay. Now I don't want a fin extrude. I want a full extrude. So I select that. It's asking me which profile should I select, because I started by selecting a profile. It says one selected. I can click another one. it says 2 selected, okay? And it's giving it the same dimensions because it's controlling them with the same extrusion. If I select the cross and then select the profile, I can still control it in that manner, okay? Let's unselect it and select this one again. It says, where should it start? Should it start at the profile plane, which is the sketch profile I created? I can say no. Let's have it start with an offset. And it says, what do you want the offset to be? Let's say I want to start 10 millimeters away from the profile. Now you can say -10, like that, and it will move it towards the other side and start from there, okay? If you pay attention, something happens. The line between these two disappeared, okay? And we're going to get to that. That's important. You need to watch out for that. Now, let's go back to 0. Let's say 0, okay? And click enter, okay? Now that's created a sketch. Now, I wasn't done. I pressed enter by accident. So I want to modify this. So I go back to my history bar on the bottom. I select my last extrusion and I right click it. I say edit feature, okay? Now, this is the feature set that I clicked enter accidentally, and I still want to make some changes. Instead of offset, I want to say profile plane. I want to keep it there, okay? It's asking me next, it's asking me if I want to, or for me to choose which direction I want to extrude this towards. Now, I can say one side, and with one side I can control which side it is, or I can say 2 sides, which is giving me another arrow right there, which I can control each extrusion independently towards each side, okay? Or I can say symmetric, which means both sides will be the same dimension, okay? For this example, I want to create one side, okay? Now it says extend type, which is this number, 37 millimeters. What kind of an extension do you want? Do you want a distance, which is what we have, 37 millimeters? Do you want it to go towards an object? Okay. If I were to select an object, it will ask me which object do you want this extrusion to go to? I can click the other side, and it will give me an extrusion that is the exact same size as this profile, okay? The other option is all. Now, all is useful when you're doing a different type of extrusion. So it's not useful for us right now, but we're going to get to that. I want to create a distance extrusion for now, and I want this extrusion to be 50 millimeters exact. Oops, I clicked enter again. Let me go back. Edit feature. Okay. Now, the last one is the taper angle. Now, the taper angle is actually very logical. You see this rotational icon. That's the same thing as the taper angle, but this gives you hand control, okay? You can make your extrusion go bigger while it's moving towards the distance, or you can make it go smaller, okay? Like that. Now, if you look at this number next to your length, this is your taper angle. So this surface, this profile, is extending 50 millimeters with an angle of 5 degrees. Let's make that -1 degree. Okay, it's very, very shallow. Okay, or let's make it -10. Goes to a point. It's not 50 millimeters anymore, but it goes to a point. Or let's say I don't want to have a taper angle. Let's keep that 0. Okay. Now, a minute ago I said, watch out for this line that was appearing between the two bodies. Let me make that again. Let's say two sides. Let's do this. Okay. Now, watch out for this line. Right now, Fusion is saying these two bodies are separate. You can tell by this line. Now, you can't tell by that line every time. The reason is, if these two surfaces are not parallel to each other, this line will always exist. But I can tell because I know these two surfaces are parallel to each other. If I were to say join, oh, that line goes away. Now this, if I click OK, this is going to become a single body. Okay, and you can see that if you go to your left-hand tree, open up bodies. Right now there's a single body. If I say, instead of join, if I say new body, once I click OK, another body is going to be created. Let's do that. Okay. This is the first one, is called body 1. The second one is called body 2. Okay. Let's go and edit this extrusion once more, and let's say join, and click OK. Right now, there's only a single body because these have been joined. Okay. Now, for next class, I would like you guys to experiment with sketching and with extrusion, different types of extrusion. And we're going to talk in class about the fundamental differences between surface modeling and solid modeling, as well as what these line, plane, axes all mean. Okay? I'll see you guys in class.